All right, welcome back. Hold on, I've got an echo in my own headset. Turn myself down. All right, well, I've jumped ahead and I've cleaned up the hands that we had in the end of the last video, and I've created a nasty little head, which isn't as bad as it looks. So let me go ahead and select that real quick. You can see this is really blocky, but that's because I did it with the smoothing preview on. So I'm going to hit 3, and that's actually the head that I was sculpting. So I don't think I have sideburns, but the rest of our model seems to be intact. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and smooth that, because my smoothing preview says that's about the way I want it. So I'm going to go to polygons, smooth. Now if I hit 1, hey, that's what that thing really looks like. Not too terrible. I'm going to do the same thing with the body, smooth that out. And I'm going to go ahead and flatten the shoes again on the bottom, because as we smooth that, we lost our crisp edge. Use the scale to flatten that back. And then pull it down. Let me add that grid. Okay, because if we never decide that we're done with our model, we're never going to be done with it. So for now, we're going to say, hey, this is what we want, and we're going to start modeling, we're going to start rigging. So as we mentioned today, anytime you think to yourself, hey, that looks good, or oh shoot, I'm about to try something, it's a good idea to go ahead and save. Save real quick. I'm going to go to my outliner first, because I think I'm done with these image planes, and they're just going to kind of get in the way. They seem to be referenced twice in our outliner, but let me see what I can do. Left click, reference, and I'm going to remove that reference. I don't know what I just did, but I don't think it was removed. Great, I duplicated it. Let's try that again. Reference, remove. That got one of them. Okay, we got those out of our scene. Now we just have our character. And instead of cube and sphere, we're going to go ahead and give them, real meaningful names. So we go to my attribute editor, pcube, toon guy body, toon guy head. Very original. We seem to have elvish ears here. Yeah, that's going to bother me. I'm going to move that point down. Now your assignment was to create whatever head you deemed necessary, and so it's not going to look just like this. However it looks, it doesn't matter because our head's going to be a very rigid object in this particular animation. Okay, not quite as freaky. One last thing I want to do before we start creating a skeleton is I want to remove this long list of history. Look at all this. We've got tweaks and splits and extrudes, and that could get in our way as we go to rig this to a skeleton later. So I'm going to delete all by type and delete history. If you can see, we're just down to the body, the shape, and then the shading groups. Our history has been deleted. We're collapsed into one object. Same with our head. Our past can no longer come back to haunt us, good or bad. And the rest of this should be pretty straightforward. I'm going to go ahead and save again. Drink some coffee. I'm going to go to my rigging set here. Rigging here. And I want to create a skeleton. One click. And now we should have a ginormous skeleton. Look at that, our toon guy doesn't even come up to his knees. We have two possible courses of action here. We can scale our guy up or we can scale the skeleton down. I'm going to go ahead and scale our guy. First I'm going to select him and focus. Right now I'm just kind of getting a good memory of where the head looks at in relation to the body because we're going to have to scale these separately. Well, we could scale them at the same time, but then their centers would get all weird. Let's try that. Make sure you grab the middle so we're scaling on all three axes. And move up. Look at that, he's got a nose coming out of his belly button. I'm going to move him up. We might have accidentally scaled about to the right size. Come down a little bit. Oh, cool. If you look down in the bottom corner where it says scaling, it looks like we've got a running total. I'm going to hover right at 7 or as close as I can. If I go up here and click on my X-ray, I can see through and see the skeleton inside. I'll grab the head and pull it up. It's about where the head was. Close enough. Alright, so we can put X-ray on the skeleton, which gives us that. One other thing we can do is our believe it was shading, and click on X-ray joints, and then instead of seeing through our character, we can see our bones pop through. Checking the line where our skeleton and our feet should both be meeting the floor. Looks good. And the shoulders look good. So if we just tried to bind to this right now, we get all kinds of weirdness. We're going to have to adjust this skeleton to fit our mesh. One thing to notice, and you may have done differently with your mesh, but mine has 3 fingers instead of 4, kind of a Mickey Mouse style. So I'm going to go over here and click pinky, and now we have the correct number of finger bones. Alright, now we're going to get weird. I'm going to grab the right side and delete it. We're going to adjust the left to the way we want, and then we're going to mirror them back over, rather than adjusting all these bones on one side and then the other. Let me go back and illustrate something. So I'm going to open up my outliner. You can see we have a character reference, and when I select that, we're actually selecting this little node on the floor as well. And our base node is the hips. And then we've got a left leg, right leg, and spine all underneath that. So I can grab the left leg, and we get that, right leg, spine, that's everything above the hips. And then of course we can get the shoulders and the neck. But one thing to note is the hips really are the center of this skeleton. Move the hips, you move everything. So we want the hips really to kind of be in there. I'm going to pull that down. And then we'll adjust everything else back up. I'll go back to deleting my right side. And I'm just going to be moving things around now. So we want that hip to be about out here. Luckily our character was origin, our skeleton was at origin, it all lined up nicely. Let's move back up. I'm going to pull the foot out some more. So I'm going to grab each of these in succession and try and stretch out our movements along all of them so we don't have one long one and one really funky short one. Okay. Get rid of that outliner for now. So this joint right in between here, we're going to imagine is probably the shoulder blade. That elbow's about in the right spot, and now we just got to get weird with the hand. I'm also going to move this head node up. So we may end up with a long neck. Yeah, that is indeed the neck. And if you can go over here to the attribute editor and you can kind of see their names previewed. Don't want to move anymore. That's the head, that's the neck, and the spine. So anyway, with this long neck, we may see his head goes really weird if he tries to bend that forward later, but we'll deal with it as it comes. Again, hitting the magic F key to focus in. That looks about right. Before I get too far with that, see we've got some curvature back here. I'm going to try and curve that spine a little bit too. Just a tad. See if we can get that neck bone to come through our neck mesh. That looks more like it. All right, these are hips. Maybe a bit much curvature of the spine, but we'll figure that out. Yeah, that looks good. Now the worst part is going to be the hand. Grabbing that base finger, trying to line the knuckles up. Here, pull that thumb out of the way. Deal with him later. That's actually a little high. So similar to what we did with the spine, I'm just grabbing piece at a time and stretching them out as evenly and as sensibly as I can. Finger bones look good enough. Thumb's a little ugly, but it's not the bone's fault. So you see if I just grab the very end, right, it just pulls up to the next nub. I kind of want to move that whole thing up a little bit from about here. So I'll grab that and pull up. Cool. That looks close enough. This is not going to be a perfect rig. We just want to demonstrate that we can do it. Okay, here's where we're going to get a little creative. I go back to my character controls. Spine count, neck count, everything looks good. Finger joints, toes. We're about to lock all that. Okay, so I'm going to grab this whole arm right here. Darn it. Actually, that looks a little high in the mesh now that I'm looking at it from this angle. And the hands back up. So you kind of want those to run through the center of whatever they're going to control. Let me check something. I believe we could do something like this. We could scale that out. That wouldn't really affect the controls, I don't think, but it could give you a better visual of what the bone's going to control. Anyway, sometimes we like to fill the skeleton out so that it kind of fills our mesh and gives us a better idea. But we're not going to do that today. All right, back to the shoulder. I've grabbed the whole arm. I'm going to go over here to skeleton and mirror joints. Make sure you click the box. This is from earlier, but make sure you get all of our settings here. So we're mirroring across YZ. We want to use the behavior mirror function. And in this case, when we're mirroring from our left arm to our right, we're going to make new objects. And so what we're going to do is with this replace names is we're going to search for left, replace with right. So I'm just going to go ahead and click mirror. Back to the attribute editor. Look, this is the character's left arm, character's right arm. So it renamed all those nodes properly. I do the same thing with the leg. Mirror joints. All the same settings, mirror. Done. I think it's about what we want. Save that real quick. Now before we do the actual magic, I'm going to one more time try and bake these transforms we just did back in. And then I'm also going to, before I even do that, I'm going to check out my outliner. So I don't know if it's going to make a difference later, but if you, when we looked at the outliner last time, under our hips we had left, right, and then spine, and now right is down underneath. I'm going to middle mouse click this, move it back up, left, right, spine. Don't know if it's going to help, don't know if it's going to hurt, but we're going to put it back the way we found it. Alright, that's good. I'm going to once again delete all by type, delete history. Interesting, I still seem to have history here. I'll go back to my outliner and I'm just going to grab the very root, the reference, which is really this dot down here. But even the hip is kind of hooked to that. It's kind of the root of our root. So I've grabbed that. Try and delete history again. History doesn't want to go away. Whatever. Okay, we've got this saved. Here's where all the magic really happens. Since we use this pre-rigged, well, pre-created skeleton rig, most of what we need to do is going to happen just at the click of a button. I've grabbed the character reference node. Just for giggles, I'm going to go ahead and select everything. I'm also going to select our mesh pieces. There's a number of ways we can do this. So under skin, there's bind skin. And there's also a smoothing skin over here. We're going to go to bind and point out some cool things. So the skinning method here, this classic linear, if I was to use that and then we bend our arms, we get kind of the effect of if you got like, if you imagine your cardboard roll for your paper towels or your wrapping paper, if you bend that, everything kind of flattens out, right? It's not like your arm. The dual quaternion here, if we use that, as we bend around that joint, it's going to try and maintain some mass around it. So a little more like your arm bending and a little less like a tube of cardboard that just kind of folds into nothing. I'm going to set my max influence just to 3. I believe it defaults to 5. And this colorized skeleton gives us a cool effect later. And I think that's all we need. So I'm going to say bind skin. If I click off, look at a rainbow skeleton. And that kind of colorizes according to how much each bone is affecting things. As you can see, our hand bones are pretty intense. Just to test this, I'm going to start moving the skeleton. So I got this arm here. I'm just going to grab it along this axis. And we get some rotation. And it's cutting our belly way up, but we are moving. Leg movement. Toes. If you look closely, we watch this ear. Guy can wiggle his ear just by twisting his arm. But we're just playing. Let me check that neck that I thought might be a problem. No, really, let me check that neck. There we go. And the ears don't tip with it. So the neck goes with it. That's cool. As you can see, the little neck underneath his head. The ears aren't going. The ears are more attached to the arm than they are his head. We'll fix that in our next video. But anyway, so we've got this guy. It's not pretty, but he is moving along with our skeleton. Fingers close. We could make a fist if we wanted. Do some Matrix style bullet dodging. Crazy. All right. One last thing I want to show before we save this rigging. So I can go up here to skin. Hold on, I've got to select the mesh first. So I've got to select the mesh. And if I go to skin and then go to bind pose, it's going to reset right back to where it was when we first did our binding. So that's really helpful. Some things to point out that once we did that bind skin, every one of the vertexes or vertices in our object got bound to at least 3 bones. No, excuse me, at most 3 bones. And so if we were to go in right now and decide we needed another line around his belly for whatever reason, and we create a new geometry, that line would not be weighted to any of the bones. And so if he then went and walked, he'd leave that line behind and stretch it all out, and it'd be nasty. So it was important to make sure that our mesh was exactly the way we wanted it before we started our rigging and binding. I don't know if it's exactly the way we wanted it, but it was close enough. So we really can't do much more with this model. We'll texture them later. We'll be able to come in and smooth and harden some edges to give them some definition. But as far as the mesh goes itself, the number of vertices and lines, they really shouldn't change. And we've locked our guy in. I mean, you could do more. You could move things around, but you'd have problems. Anyway, so that's that. I do want to try one more thing. So the head and the ears, remember we had problems with that. I'm going to grab the head right now, and I'm going to go up here and I'm going to unbind him. See if there's any cool. Delete history, remove joint colors, sure, detach. Whoa. How odd. We lost the coloring on the skeleton. But if we move our neck, it doesn't affect him. Twisting our arm or moving it up and down doesn't seem to affect his ears, which is a good thing. Go back to bind pose. I want to try something. I'm going to grab his head, and I'm going to grab, if I can, just the head node. Head node, head, Now let's see if we can bind that. That wouldn't matter. Just in case for this one, I'm going to say, hey, only one influence. So that head should only be affected by the head node now. Let's test it by moving the neck. Now as we rotate the neck, the head goes with it, and so with any luck, this head will go with it too. What in the world? Those ears still don't follow correctly. Ooh. I'll try that one more time and then we'll call it a night. Grab that mesh, just the head, unbind. Okay, that's what happened. The first time I unbound the head from the mesh, it removed the joint colors. So all the joints that were being affected or were affecting that head had their colors removed. Okay. Grab the head node. What the heck? And the neck node? Nah, just the head node. And the head. Bind skin. Bind to selected joints. That's what I want. Bind to closest in hierarchy. And then the drop off rate up. Let's try that. There we go. Look at that. Head only moves with that node. Excellent. Shake his head. Doesn't twist anything else. Could still go backwards for his matrix bullet dodges. And nothing else affects him. Alright, I'm going to go grab our meshes. Go back to bind pose. And I'm going to save this sucker. Okay. Next time around, we'll play with the skin weighting. We'll be going in and adjusting all the vertices to make sure that they only go along with the bones we want. And that's it for now.